Bonsoir à tous et à toutes, je suis Nora Boisouni, journaliste et rédactrice en chef de l'émission Story Série sur OCS. Vous venez de découvrir les 3 premiers épisodes de The Baby qui sera diffusé à partir du 25 avril sur OCS. Et j'ai maintenant le plaisir d'accueillir l'équipe de la série pour une discussion qui s'annonce passionnante. So now I'm going to switch to English to introduce every one of them. Sian Robins-Grace, your co-creator and executive producer. Hi.
Hello, thanks for having us. Really happy to be here.
Lucy Gamer, your co-creator and producer. Hello.
Hi.
Nicole Kassel, your executive producer and director of the first episode.
Hello.
Naomi De Pere, your executive producer from the studio Sister.
Hello. Hi there.
And Michelle de Swarte, who plays Natasha, who you've just seen, the heroine of The Baby. Welcome.
Hello.
I'm really psyched to be speaking with you today because I really enjoyed the show. And my first question goes to Sian and Lucy. You're the show's creators. Can you tell me about the premise of The Baby and why you wanted to create the show?
Yeah, sure thing. So we thought it would be funny to tell a story essentially about a woman who doesn't have children and knows she doesn't want to have children, who is forced to hang out with a baby for a series. So we start the show with Natasha, who's in her late 30s. She's childless, she doesn't want to have children, and she's comfortable with that status. But for some reason, is forced to engage with what she's not maybe engaging with in terms of her own relationship with motherhood or non-motherhood, and then her own relationship with care. And we see that when she's with her other friends or other family members. So the baby and her relationships with them will sort of help her engage with maybe what she's not really engaging with at the beginning of the show.
Sian, how did this idea come up?
It actually sort of fell out of the sky. We were hiking and Lucy was like, oh, I have this image of a baby falling out of the sky and landing in a woman's arms. And we sort of were like, oh, that's a really funny, weird image. And it kind of immediately felt like a horror or a fantasy image because they're so surreal. And then the next question was, well, who's the funniest person who could catch a baby? Surely it's a woman who doesn't want a baby. And then we kind of spent the rest of the day like writing episode 1 basically, which we thought was going to be a short film. But then, and as we developed the series, we realized that there's something really sinister and like complicated about the way women are expected to want to have children. And also the way that women, once they have children, are expected to be these like perfect or giving mothers. And those are both like really violent expectations. So like we were kind of curious about, well, why is this narrative? Why are these expectations so powerful in the culture when they're also obviously so damaging? And that just felt like a really rich territory to explore.
Naomi, as executive producer, how did you react when this project was presented to you?
I don't think Sian and Lucy are going to like me saying this because they're both so modest, but I would go so far as to say it's like one of the best first 10 pages of a script I've read. It was actually sent to us as a pilot script, and we were genuinely running around the office with scripts in our hand going, this is the thing, this is amazing, it's funny, it's purposeful, and it's sort of radical and iconic, and we just believed in it straight away. And so we hounded for a meeting with Sian, got a meeting with Sian, and then meeting with Sian and Lucy, and then talking more about where it goes, made us just fall even more in love with it. We just loved the whole concept for it, really. Yeah.
Nicole, you've worked on many incredible shows such as The Leftovers, Watchmen, Better Call Saul, The Americans, Westworld, and you directed the first episode of The Baby. Was it challenging to set the scope for the rest of the directors after you?
It was challenging, but exciting, mostly exciting. The biggest challenge, setting up a show is doing something in the pilot that the following directors can emulate, being that they won't have as much time and will have more restrained budget. So trying to keep that in mind while delivering as much production value as I can.
Michelle, you play Natasha, the unlucky heroine of the show. What drew you to this series?
You'd be hard pressed not to be charmed by Natasha, she's sort of like she's emotionally arrested, but also really sort of vulnerable with the fierceness that she wants to like defend herself in. And so yeah, she was a really easy character to pick up, you know. Like I think you can't not relate to her. You might not like her, but you definitely relate to her, you know.
Sean and Lucy, as you were saying before, there's incredible pressure for women to have kids today. Isn't Natasha kind of punished for not complying?
Yeah, that's a really interesting read. I think personally, I don't see Natasha as being punished necessarily. I think like, you know, like Lucy was saying, like she's not at peace with the changes that are happening around her and in her life, right? And these changes are inevitable. Like people around her are going to start moving on and going to start having children or making families or like changing their lives, and she's sort of like this when we meet her, and she's reacting by like lashing out at the people who she loves. And when the baby arrives, I sort of see that as an invitation from the universe for her to go on this journey that she really needs to go on. But as is often the case with invitations like that, it arrives in a very unappealing form.
It does, because this is a demonic baby.
Yeah.
People, the audience will discover afterwards, because I have the chance to see the first 6 episodes, but people will know the origin story of the baby afterwards. What was your vision, Nicole, or inspirations for the show?
Right away, when I started reading the script, I started to see, and images that came right to me were immediately Rosemary's Baby for sure, but also Raising Arizona. And I loved that. I was so excited that, you know, you rarely say those two films in the same sentence. So I really I studied those films and The Shining, and a lot of Coen brothers, you know, their way of weaving, I feel like tonally, they kind of hit the sweet spot for this, the way they did Fargo, and, you know, the comedy's there, but the drama and the motion is very poignant as well.
Is it particularly hard to blend comedy and horror?
Not, I would say yes and no. The no is because you're not trying to do the same both at once. You know, you stay true to what the scene is calling for, and so if it was a more comedic scene, that was the tone of that scene. If it was creepy or horror, that was that scene. I mean, I'm not trying to do everything at once, because that's where it'll turn into mush. You know, the script, the brilliance of the script is interweaving those different scenes. And then the challenge, I'd say, is really finding the degree. You know, you are walking this razor edge tonally, and are you going to go to slapstick or stay more grounded? How gory horror are we going to go? So there's that spectrum. And you could go so far in each direction, and it's really a subjective choice. But I worked a lot with the editor and Sean and Lucy on finding just how to thread that needle for this show.
And Naomi, the baby is sister's first foray into the horror genre. That must have been very exciting.
But yeah, it is. It's the first more purely horror, although it's horror comedy, I suppose. And I've always been quite a big horror fan myself, and I love the way, a bit like in comedy, you can kind of deal with quite big socio-political themes in a tongue-in-cheek way. And we're always fans here of taking on big subject matters, but perhaps in the genre you least expect. And so there was something about, you know, we've been talking around motherhood at Sister for a long time, but it was hard to find a project that felt original in its point of view about that. And then when this landed, it just utterly did that, I suppose. And actually, as a mother, I found the fact that it was dealing with it through horror in a way the most appropriate genre, because the intensity of it is relevant, and I think there will be something weirdly recognisable about the intensity of how alone Natasha feels in that experience of being with that baby, one of the big challenges was the baby itself. You know, how do we make this monster a monster when actually it's just a very sweet baby?
Amazingly monstrous, amazingly terrifying. So as we said, the baby's a dark horror comedy. Sian and Lucy, did you want from the beginning to use humor to tell this story, and why, if so?
Yeah, I think drawing on a few things that Naomi said, I think that it feels really natural that this should be a sort of comedy horror, because you're trying to make your villain or your monster the cutest baby that you've ever seen. So it's sort of just putting the baby in the sort of scenarios we put him in naturally lend themselves, because they're funny and they're really dry way. I think one of the things that also feels really nice about the horror comedy for this subject matter is that there are a lot of taboos around motherhood, that it feels that the horror seems to draw out the sort of maybe the darker side of those things, and then having comedy helps you sort of make them more palatable. You know, the voicing of regret from parents, or you know, acknowledging murderous feelings towards babies, which you just don't often see.
Yeah, difficult blend to achieve. Michelle, you come primarily from the comedy world, and are you also a fan of this horror comedy genre, or horror in general?
Yeah, I am. So it was really exciting because I'm a huge horror fan. I'm one of those people that will like watch horror films on their own, you know? So and comedy and the sort of tension of horror are quite similar, you know? They both need this like big release, and they both sort of require you to buy into what's going on. So the payoff at the end is big. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of horror. I love it.
Is this blend a delicate balance? I think it might be a delicate balance to achieve as an actor, not to be too funny and have this dark humor, but being in like this terrifying environment with a killer baby.
Yeah, but it also felt like you really needed that release. You know what I mean? Because of the subject matter, and because, you know, everyone has their own experiences with it, and maybe they haven't spoken to someone else about how they've really felt, but they can relate to something. That, yeah, I feel like it there was more synergy than you would imagine. You know what I mean? They seem like polar opposites, but I think like anything that's at opposite ends of the spectrum, there's probably quite a lot in common.
If you keep doing that, this baby will kill you.
Lucy and Sian, there are many mothers in the show, and all of them are exhausted, and they think they're failing as women, as mothers. Did you also want to raise the issue of new mothers dealing with, we said that, abandonment in taking care of their baby alone, or feeling like they do not have the support they would like to have in our societies?
Yeah, definitely. I think, you know, we know that by and large, the responsibility for taking care of children lies like mostly with women and with primary carers. So, but what's crazy is that the culture has developed very powerful narratives that most of us have internalized about why that should be the case. It's a woman's role, it's a woman's nature, and obviously like there is no universal experience of womanhood, and there's no universal experience of motherhood. And I think the different stories in the show, the different character strands butt up against those rules in different ways. You know, Mrs. Eves, Bobby, Sam, Natasha, they all have different ways of like coming up against these expectations and different ways of trying to navigate them.
Michelle, did you have a favorite scene among the first 3 episodes that you enjoyed filming, or maybe anything particularly challenging?
I really enjoyed the poker scene, which was, I think that was our first day of filming as well. But I really enjoyed the poker scene because I think after that scene, Natasha goes out on this journey on her own. So it's quite a sort of singular story for a little while. Also, it's a rare time when you see laughter happening. You know what I mean? Although it's a comedy and when you're watching it, you laugh. But I think when you see the characters, it's, you know, it's, I really love that scene. And also I love the actors that I was working with, and it was just so fun. And the, you know, Natasha's apartment had just been built, and I've been working with, you know, Nicole for months, and then we were finally on set. So for me, the poker scenes, many a happy memory.
What about you, Nicole? Is there a scene you enjoyed directing in the first episode, or anything particularly challenging for your first maybe day of shooting with that baby?
The most challenging was by far the opening sequence, because it was very logistically challenging because we had the baby and we were filming at night and we needed a cliff over an ocean. You know, there were so many things we needed that none of it existed in real life, and trusting that process. But it's a challenge, but that's so fun. I like those challenges where you're really dissecting a scene and storyboarding it, and it's where movie magic really, really happens, you know. So
you do the magic. You're the magician too.
One of them. You know, it's a coven here. It's not just one. You know.
Thank you, coven of TV
You know.
witches and amazing stuff. Thank you very much, all of you.
Take care. Thank you.
Thank you.
So
Thanks so much for having us.